If it is an uncomfortable scene and you have to go deal with emotions and actions that that even you as the creator go, "Ooh, this is going to be difficult." How important is it that you have actors who are experienced and trust you and will kind of like help you with the more difficult things in that movie or things that might make you personally uncomfortable? Were they right there with did they balk at anything or
no, nothing? Especially that scene. I turned it over to them and said, "Here's what has to happen. Here's the blocking, as I see it." And this is, and it was very detailed what I was asking them to do, and.
Now, did you audition any of them, or was it pretty much you knew who you wanted?
Some I did, some I didn't.
And was that the scene you used?
No, because that scene I offered it to Tandy Newton. That role to Tandy Newton. I offered it to Matt and Ryan as well.
Right.
And so they.
I know Terrence is being heralded as appropriately as
Isn't he great?
An overnight sensation.
He's amazing in this. I'd seen him in Greg Hoblett's film, the Prisoner of War picture, Heart's War, and he was magnificent in it. And I called up Greg and asked him about it, and he said, "No, he's wonderful." So, no, I'm really glad that worked out, and we got to use him in the film.
So, was that a case where you had experienced actors who validated your vision for that scene and knew what you were trying to say? And
well, hopefully, trust is the most important thing in any relationship, and certainly that's true of the director and the actor. It's made a rule early on never to lie to an actor.
Right.
Because often as directors we are asked to lie because the producer says we can only shoot for 10 more minutes, and because of this reason or that, and you want to keep the actor on your side. You don't want to have to tell them that we only shoot for 10 more minutes because it's a budgetary thing, and so you say no, it's this reason why, and it comes back and bites you in the ass each time. It's better to come up and say, "Listen, I'm really sorry that we just took 7 hours shooting the other side on her coverage, and now we got to turn and do yours in 10, but that's what we got."
Right.
And then the actor can deal with that and go, "Okay." So trust is incredibly important. The great thing about hiring really skilled actors is they will take it to a level that you never imagined.
Right.
And if they trust themselves, they'll discover things in those moments that they didn't know were going to happen, and you didn't know, and you just hope the camera's in focus. Or if it isn't, it's fine too. You use it anyways.
Right.
Wonderful.
When you approach the writing of a scene like that, or any scene, do you come at it from what's the plot of this scene, or what's the themes I'm dealing with, or physically what do I need to happen?
Usually
or is it
not
all
the themes. I mean, I never thought I was going to write about race relations.
Right.
I never wanted to make a statement about race.
Right.
We were just following these characters around, and they started talking about this. Usually the characters are where I start, and then just continue asking myself, what's the worst thing that can happen to this character? And that's what was certainly in Crash. We just kept saying, well, that's horrible. Now what can be worse than that?
Right.
I love finding the worst things happening at the best moments of a person's life, and contradictory, the best things happening at the worst, or whatever. It was probably, that probably didn't contradict it. It was really exactly the same. But so trying to have a scene that embodies those disparate elements and of joy and agony. It's when you find that, and you can keep pushing and pulling your characters back and forth like that. That's the fun writing.
Well, it's such a powerful introduction to the Cameron character. Like, where did that character come from?
It's a couple of places, but the largest places. I was on a lot working, and I was walking towards the stage, and I saw 2 white producers talking to a black director who was in their employ. And as I got closer, I realized one of the white producers was telling a joke, and it was a racist joke. And he was telling it to the black director, as if to say, "You see, we're all the same. We can say these things now."
Right.
And before I get close enough to say, "No, you can't, you asshole," the punchline came, and the black director half laughed, slapped the guy in the shoulder, turned and walked back to the stage. And I said to myself, what piece of his soul did that man just eat?
Right.
In order to keep his job, in order to get the job next week.
Wow.
And it was a very powerful moment for me.
And that's on screen, basically, the way you just described it.
Yeah. I knew that. I mean, I think Tony's character is probably embodies the most pure evil of the entire film. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's got this wonderful kind of passive expression when he's basically giving that to have very objectionable construction.
That's the closest thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the film is a fable, but that's the closest thing to what actually happens in Hollywood is
Right.
of any of the scenes in Crash.
When you saw it, did it play out the way you imagined it?
Yeah, exactly. Tony, it was perfect. Exactly where I thought he'd play it. It was just with such an ease, because that's how we kill each other with ease. We have clean consciences. We think we're trying to help a person. It's never the people who are trying to hurt you that you have to worry about. And even in professionally, it's the people who are trying to help you. You have to be careful of. They're the people who will screw up a movie, certainly, and screw up a script, because everyone's trying to help.
Right.
And they'll, if you listen to them all, if you let them help you, you will destroy yourself. And that's the same way in life, I think.
Right. Did you consider the dangers of having multiple storylines when you were crafting the screenplay?
Oh, yeah.
Is that something that concerns you, or?
Oh, I thought we were crazy.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how many storylines we actually had in the end. I had to count them up finally in order to rehearsals. And actually, Kathy Schulman counted them, and I think we have 9 or 10. I had no idea. It was insane what we were doing. I thought maybe it'd be 3 or 4 storylines, but since I kept following the characters, and each character had his own story, and it was just an egg scramble.
Did you lose any in the was the first draft? Did you have more than the
we lost some we lost some in the shooting. We lost one in the shooting. 2 of the actors got sick one day, and it was the day I was shooting a 4-person scene. So I ended up shooting a scene with Brendan Fraser and Don Cheadle with 2 stand-ins. And it was for 2 days. Well, so the actors were just deadly ill. And thank God we got insurance days, but we could never get back to that set with those actors. Right. So I actually sat down and created the Flanagan character in there that Bill Fichtner plays in order to bridge the information that I lost in that scene. And in that the introduction of that, Jennifer Esposito is introduced to the Brendan Fraser character. He says, "Who the hell is this?" And Cheadle says, "This is my partner." And Esposito says, to Dee, I think you know my mother, Marita Franco. And he goes, "Oh, absolutely, just say hello to your mother. She's a wonderful woman." And she walks off. And then he takes Don aside, and the scene continues. Well, at the end of the movie, there's a scene in which Brendan's character is saying goodnight to his housekeeper and thanking her for staying to watch Jean. And he shows her out, and she goes out, and she gets into a car, and Jennifer Esposito is driving. Oh. And he's been calling her Maria the entire time. He doesn't even know his housekeeper's name is Marita. Wow. And the housekeeper says, Jennifer Esposito.
I have to watch the film again with that in mind.
Jennifer Esposito's character says, you shouldn't stay so late, Mom. And they said, you should quit this job. And they said, they need me. And she says, Mom, they don't even know your name. They drive off. And I really wanted it in the film, but we couldn't get back to shoot it. So we have those end scenes only, not the middle scenes.
Do you ever encounter a roadblock when you're trying to craft a story?
Ever?
Well,
how many times a day?
Did it happen on Crash? Did you hit a point where you're like, I don't know what to do?
Yeah, I mean, in the first draft, we got through it somehow, and then we did a reading at Bobby's theater company, the Actors Gym, and we went back and we just asked. It was with the characters of the 2 carjackers. They were just going along, and it was a nice little story, and they were spouting this and that, and we got to the end, and what happens, happens. I said, there's just not enough tension here. There's not enough conflict. They have to run into a barrier. So I asked myself, I said, that Korean woman who we called Chinese, the Korean woman who was in the car accident in the beginning. She was speeding, and she didn't see this cop car stop in front of her, and there was lights all around, and she rammed into the back of it. I wonder why. And I mean, where was her head? Right. I said, well, she was obviously really concerned. Her mind wasn't on the road. So what was she thinking about? I said, maybe her husband. Maybe her husband was in an accident. Maybe he was run over. I went, ooh. They run over her husband, and that's where she's going. And so then as soon as they ran over who they referred to as the Chinaman, then of course there was great conflict in their scene, and then they had to, because they couldn't get the car from here to there, and so that's the type of thing we just kept doing. Asking questions was really important. It was every time we ran into a problem.
And it led to another story.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than trying to write around it and say, oh, it's fine. You always write into the problems. Always ask yourself questions about those, and they will always lead to something better.
If you're writing something that hasn't been produced yet or doesn't have the benefit of the actors or a read-through, how do you usually plow through a roadblock and just like the outlining of something or writing the writing?
Well, that was the case. I mean, we read it, but it wasn't at the reading that we. This was later when we were sitting around and actually banging our heads against the computer screen that we came up with a solution. Do you have
in any of your work? Do you have one scene that you had to lose that you love and regret, or that you can't get out of your mind? It's like, I can't believe I took that out.
Not in the writing, in the shooting. I took out a couple of scenes, which I went back and put in the director's cut for the DVD. But there was ones you haunted.
Is that always hard to kind of take off the writer hat and be the editor or the director?
No, it's easy to take it off because the writer's hat's a horrible hat to wear.
Right.
It's funny looking, first of all, and then it's uncomfortable.
It's smothering.
It really is, and so you just desperately want to take that hat off and just become the director. And once you are, you deal, as we all deal with writers, with just disdain, and you go, oh, please,
Right. Have you ever thrown yourself out of your own office?
Not yet, but I'd often, an actor will come up to me and say on the set, can I change this? And I go, absolutely. And Bobby would be behind me going, you can't change that. I'm going, what do you mean? It was because this and this and this leads to this one.
Right.
Oh, Bobby's right. I'm sorry, we can't change it. I'm always for changing the words. And that's why I love to work with Bobby as a producer as well, because he'll grab me and say, no, that's we need that. You can't change that.
Was that the first time you had collaborated with another writer?
No, I started off, doing television. I was collaborating.
But that's more of a collaborative medium because there's so many writers on those shows.
Yeah, I think it was after sitting alone so long and writing $1 Million Baby that, and actually Bobby came in and helped me with the end of that. Because I was stuck, and he came in, and I was trying to, in $1 Million Baby, take 5 of the short stories and cram it into one.
Right.
And I ended up, with a mess of a screenplay, and he read it for me, and so we got to pull this out. And so it was a great collaboration. So you just look forward to someone else sitting in the room with you for a while. And so then as soon as you do that, you look forward to going writing on your own.
What was the first screenplay you ever wrote?
Oh, it was a horrible thriller called Last Laugh, Murder at the Comedy Store. I think it was. Yes.
That's an interesting genre mix.
Yes, it was. And we actually got optioned and for a second, and then it fell apart. But thank God it was never
Was the person you killed at the Comedy Store Pauly Shore?
We was killed. Yeah, it was just one after another.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I did one called Doppelganger was right after that, which I think I'll just have to go back and rework someday.
Right.
With a man who doesn't want to be who he is, who meets someone else who does. So.
How many screenplays do you think you'd written before your first produced credit?
I think I'd written 4 or 5, maybe more, because you tend to forget your failures and way and celebrate your victories. The first time I tried to escape from television, I wrote.
You make it sound like Escape from Witch
Mountain. It
Mountain
really is sometimes because you work so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard working.
Right.
I so admire writer-producers because it's 22 episodes a year, 24 episodes a year.
It looks like a lot of work.
After 10 episodes, you're brain dead. You just have to somehow push yourself through. But the first time I tried it, it was about 5 years before I wrote $1 Million Baby, and it was a story that really intrigued me, an original piece. It was set in Detroit in a steel mill, in a sort of dying industry, and so sex, betrayal, and unionism, and so I wrote the script. Took 6 months off, and wrote the screenplay. Gave it to my wife, Deborah, when I was finished, and she reads all my stuff. And she's a really harsh critic, which is one of the reasons I love her, and hate her. And so she read it.
But you trust her.
Oh, completely. You have to find one person you can trust, and I trust her. And so I gave it to her, and she said, it's interesting, but it's flawed, isn't it? And, yeah, it is. So she gave me some thoughts, and I went back for another 3 months and dug in and wrote the second draft. And all that time, you're not making any money, and you've got a lot. When you're used to making television money, you've got a lot of people to support, and your family, and your schools, and all my kids. So like 9 months in, I get the second draft done, and I give it to her, and she reads it right away and says, it's not as good as the first draft, is it? Oh. That one's in a drawer. It's going to come out someday. But then, it's like when you asked earlier about leaving to do leaving television to do Crash and $1 Million Baby, I came home and I asked her, I said, I'm just going to write this. I can't do television for the time being. I have to go do an independent movie or two. She said, how long do you think it'll take to break in? Because you're reinventing yourself. And I said, I'm thinking 3 to 4 years from the time I write it to the time it's done. And she said, well, great, how much money do we have? So I said, I think about enough to last 6 months to a year. So she said, okay, well, if we sell the house, we sell the house. You've got to write what your dream is.
Wow.
And so...
so you scored with your dad and your wife,
yes,
basically.
absolutely. Yeah, so it was wonderful. She was incredibly supportive. You need supportive people around you to write. Because you have to keep taking risks. If you stop taking risks, it's a cliche, but you go dead.
Do you think it's a necessary evil that you have to write a certain amount of bad screenplays to get to a place where you're writing nothing but good screenplays?
Oh, yeah, because you have to write in order to write.
Right.
You don't have to get any good at it. You just have to write and write and write. You have to go through. I'm very jealous of the kids that come out and write a great screenplay at 20.
Right.
But we find hope in the fact that it may be the only thing they can ever write, and so if the career takes a nosedive after that. But it takes a long time. At least it took me a long time to get any good.
Is there a point when you're writing a spec screenplay where you've hit the point of no return mark, where you know it's going to be good and it's worth completing? And have you ever bailed on one where you thought?
Bail on them all the time.
Right.
Yeah. You especially in the story stage. I'm working on this one right now with Mark Bohl, who's a terrific writer who wrote an article about the Iraq War, and I optioned it. And he and I are working the story out together. And it's just, I thought it was going to be dead easy. And it's like, 3 weeks into the story process, and it's killing me.
And is that usually where the rubber hits the road and kind of like, can I finish this? Is this worth
Especially
completing?
if you've got something else that's tempting.
Right.
Either writing something else or answering your emails. Anything. You'd rather do anything rather than work on a story.
Do you think any screenplay can be made better, or do you think at some point it gets to a point of diminishing returns?
I think both things are true.
Right.
And it's interesting the way we work here in town is, there's many writers brought onto a project, usually because I find in my limited experience, they usually try to get the cheap screenplay done first, and then we will fix it later. And the cheap screenplay is usually cheap for a reason.
Right.
Very rarely do you find the young kid who'll work for $25 who come up with, Citizen Kane. And then we potchkey around and try and make a, as you say, you said, shoot a budget rather than shooting a screenplay, and that's. In those cases, it's pretty hard to make them any better.
Is there any difference in writing an original or adapting someone else's, an author's work? Is it a different skill set, or is it?
Sure, it's a completely different side of the brain.
Right.
I mean, one is the adaptation is you're solving puzzles.
Right.
The information is mostly there, and you're trying to figure out how to make it work. With $1 Million Baby, for example, I had the story, for the short story, which is called $1 Million Baby, in the book Rope Burns. FX Tool wrote. Beautiful, beautiful series of short stories. And in that short story is only Maggie and Frankie. And she comes in on page 1, and I think and asks Frankie to train her, and on page 3 he goes, okay.
Right.
And then he sets about training, and what happens, the tragic circumstances. But to try and find a way to tell that, I had to create the character of Scrap, which I pulled a small character from another story. Ooh, what if these guys were best friends?
Right.
What if he worked in the gym? What if his life was, and create that whole backstory.
Right.
Then and then I pulled elements from that story, a story called Frozen Water. Then once I had that, I had to say, okay, what does it mean to me? What in me is in Frankie? And so I made him the Catholic with this. He was already Catholic in there because he was Irish, but made him daily communicant. This man who had so much guilt for something, and I pulled from my life and my relationship with my daughter, and I created this estranged daughter for him, and something he couldn't forgive himself for, which I thought was terrific. Because terrific for the character, because you want them to be, the odds to be stacked against this character, but I didn't want to explain what that was.
Right.
And so I never explained in the screenplay what went on between he and his daughter. And
so this was a big adaptation because there was no real traditional narrative. You had to pull all these disparate elements together.
It's wonderful short stories.
Yeah.
But I think you don't know what an adaptation is. That's the tough thing. And that's why it's so silly trying to judge one against the other based on the results.
Right.
You see a movie like Motorcycle Diaries was just pulled from 2 books and a series of diaries, and the way they pulled it together was brilliant.
Right.
Or other things you adapt and you just
Right.
basically just write the plot that's already in there and take a couple of weeks.
With $1 Million Baby, did you ever like get out on the set and go, okay, Clint Eastwood, Hilary Swank, Morgan Freeman? Did you ever pinch yourself and go,
every day?
This is
because
awesome.
I wrote it with them in mind.
Right.
And it's very rare. Crash, I wrote with no one in mind.
Right.
But from the beginning, I saw Morgan, and in fact, I didn't think Morgan would do it because I was writing it for him. And often we write for actors, even though he didn't know I was writing for him. You'll capture the voice too well. And but I saw Hilary as the boxer, and I figured the only 2 people who could play Frankie was either Clint Eastwood or Paul Newman. And so when we got the 3 of them, when does that happen? It took 4 years to get to them. From the time we spec'd it, from I spec'd it to the time he said yes. But yeah, it was pretty amazing.
How did the studio line up for that particular project?
It was an odd lineup. I'd written it on spec, and then Al Ruddy and I had put the money up for the rights together. And then I was supposed to give him the script, which I wrote, and he was going to then do the financing. And originally it was going to be an independent film, and he said he had the money to do a $6 or $7 million film. As it turned out, when the script was in, other things had occurred, and he no longer could do that. So he then said we had to go out and try to find actors and get a studio set up. And I was going, no studio's going to make this. You crazy? And so he went out, and then you go through the whole battle of who's right for this.
Right.
And I was very clear that I wanted Hilary, and he had other ideas, all good ideas, but just different. And for some of the roles. And so you talk it out and argue it out. He tried one way, and then I finally said, listen, okay, now it's my turn. Now, after 3 years, paying the option every year, $25,000 a year, it's for a guy who's unemployed, it's not easy.
Right.
And so I took it to Lakeshore, to Gary Lucchese and to Tom Rosenberg, and said, I want to do this. And they said, who do you see in the role? I said, Hilary Swank. And Tom had just had dinner with Hilary the week before and said, oh, she'd be brilliant. I said, yeah. And so he said to me, do you think you can make it for like $6 million? I said, yes. And Al had already gotten it to Morgan Freeman, and he was very interested. So we actually, he said, great, we'll do it. And just find us a Frankie. So we're out looking for them. And Clint, Al had sent the script to, actually the book of short stories to Clint way back when, before I wrote it. But Clint, loved the short stories, didn't say it was going to be a movie. And then from that on was doing Mystic River, and it was too busy. So in any case, circumstances rolled around, I started shooting Crash, and Al called back and said, can I give the script to Clint now? I said, of course, he'd be fabulous. So Al gave it to him. They're close friends. And he said to Al, I'm not going to act anymore. I've retired, but I'll read the script because you're my friend. And thank God he read it. And he and his wife read it, and he called and asked Al, he said, I really like it. Do you think I could direct? So they came to me, Tom and Gary came and said, well, what do you think? Clint Eastwood direct this? No, with me, it would have been a small movie. It would have been a $6 million film and about girl boxing. And I don't think anyone in the world would have seen it. Because fight fans weren't going to go see a movie about girl boxing, and drama fans weren't going to go to a movie about boxing. And so I thought about that. And it's always hard to give up something that you've been on for so long. But I thought, Clint Eastwood will do a great job with this. And so over Christmas I decided, and it was a great decision. He did a wonderful movie.
Describe your first meeting with him.
Well, our first conversation, he called me when I was in post. It was, I think, February. I was in post on Crash, and he called, and I was on my cell phone.
It's actually worth noting that I know a lot of people think, oh, your accolades from $1 Million Baby got Crash made. I bet a lot of people don't realize that you were in production on Crash before Clint Eastwood committed to $1 Million Baby.
No, and he got his out much faster because he's just much more efficient than I am. But he called, and he said, I really liked your script. And I'm on the cell phone, I can hardly hear him. I don't even think it's Clint Eastwood. So I said, thanks. And he said, so what are you doing now? And I was writing something else. I said, nothing. He said, no, I've got this book I'd like you to consider doing, but I can't tell you about it now. going to talk to my partner first. I said, great, well, whatever you think. So I call my Uber agents and say, who's Clint Eastwood's partner? No one knows. So they run around for a week trying to find out who Clint Eastwood's new partner is. And no one can figure it out. So he calls me back a week later. We've never met still. And he says, I gave the script of $1 Million Baby to Stephen, and he liked it a lot. Thinks you're a good writer, and so we'd like to send you this book to consider adapting. I said, I'm thrilled. Stephen who? He said, well, Spielberg, my partner. I went, oh, great. Now I've got two icons to deal with.
Right.
And so we met, and he and I, Clint and I, and talked about. I read the book, and it was tough. It's a really tough book to do.
Which book was it?
It was called Flags of Our Fathers, and by James Bradley, and
about the men who raised the flag at Iwo Jima.
Exactly, and it was a big story. I had no idea how to do it. So Clint and I met for 3 hours, and it was pretty cool. And then he said, well, let's go meet with Stephen. So we go over to Stephen's office, and I figure I'm not going to get this job, but I'm going to tape record this meeting. So I asked them if I can record it. It's just the three of us around the table. And they say, sure. So for the first half hour, you have Stephen talking about the first time he met Fellini, and you have Clint talking the first time he met Orson Welles, and I'm just sitting going, oh. So they finally turned to me and said, Stephen asked, so what do you think of the book? I said, it's really, really good. And I really want this job, right? So my pitch is, I think I have about a 10% chance of being able to pull it off. And he goes, oh, okay. So we talk, for a while, and we get to the end of the meeting, and Stephen says, so what do you think now? I said, I think I've got about an 11% chance. He goes, okay. So we end and we go out, and Clint drives me back to the studio, and I say to him, I will do this if you'd like me to, but I really don't have any idea how to make this work. He says, okay, well, go ahead. So I'm trying to be let off the hook, and the man won't let me off the hook. So while he's shooting $1 Million Baby, I go to the set quite often. And when I'm not, I'm trying to work on the story. And every week I go there to turn him down, to say, I can't do this. There's no way I can figure it out. And he just says, you'll figure it out. And so 2 months later, I finally figured out and figure out what I want to say. And so he just wouldn't let me quit. And so I wrote it and turned the script in. And once again, I met with him, and I didn't do an outline. Didn't figure it out. And so I just turned the first draft in, and Clint said, good work. And Stephen had a couple of notes. I did a couple hours work, and they're off shooting. It was the same thing with $1 Million Baby. He just shot the script.
Was there something comforting about working with someone who has so much experience that they could look past your hesitation and see the future and know that you would deliver that script?
That's what Clint does. He trusts people. And that's why actors love him. He hires good actors, and he trusts them to do their job, and stays out of their way, and only gets in there if they can't find, if they get lost in somehow. And I'd love working with Clint. I'll write anything for him.
Was there any point, before the good luck on $1 Million Baby where you were discouraged, or you thought this isn't going to get made?
Well, I mean, it took a long time for both those, for Crash and for $1 Million Baby to get financed. Crash took around forever until we found. Mark Harris actually found Bob Yari, and Bob said he put the money up. Bob and Kathy Schulman, and I think it was like $7 million or something. And that was 3.5 years from the time I wrote it. And $1 Million Baby, it was the same. It was a long trek, and you often start wondering, if it's ever going to get made. But see, with both those films, I was quite sanguine with the fact that they wouldn't get made. I knew no studio would do $1 Million Baby. I mean, look at the subject matter. I refer to it in tone as leaving Las Vegas only depressing. No studio was going to do that. And even when Clint came on, we were talking about the fact that Warner's even hesitated, and after Mystic.
But he had just delivered a dark, unlikely film that had gone on to be quite profitable and received multiple Oscar nominations, and they still said, maybe not on this new one?
Well, because they'd read the script,
Right.
And they knew this. What the hell is this? It wasn't a studio movie.
Yeah.
It was only a studio movie because of Clint Eastwood.
Right.
Because Clint, we look forward to seeing Clint Eastwood movies.
Right.
We know what kind of drama he delivers. And then I think they quickly realized that it wasn't about the script.
Right.
It was about the fact that you had a fine director who
Right.
knew material and they could trust him.
Right. If I was going to watch the Clint Eastwood $1 Million Baby next to the Paul Haggis $1 Million Baby, what do you think the main differences would have been, had you directed it?
Oh, well, we wouldn't be talking about it, first of all. I don't think I'd be sitting here. That would be the big difference, yeah. You can't say. He did a beautiful, beautiful film.
Being on the other side of both those experiences now, they're both, hard films to get made. Did the success of the film after its release, does that impact how you think about it? Would you have been as proud if it wasn't as big a hit? How important is the acceptance of the films on a broad level?
I'm a weird duck, and I love my failures,
Right.
sometimes more than my successes. So my best work in television, and some of the things I'm most proud of, are films that failed, television shows that failed, Easy Streets, and a couple other things that no one saw. And the ones that succeeded, just some of them. I co-created Walker, Texas Ranger, meaning that Jeff Zagansky called me. I was leaving for
Right.
Europe to do something, and he called and said, "Paul, I have Chuck Norris, and I have a script that doesn't work about
Go figure that.
yeah about Texas Rangers."
Right.
And he said, and I said, "And you're thinking of me because?"
Right.
He said, "No, please do me a favor, just write the pilot." So I did. I rewrote the pilot in a week. Turned it back in. They got their series pickup, and I went off.
Right.
And then I got a co-created credit, and having done only a
Right.
week's work on the show, and people would come up to me, "I love your show. I love your series."
No, that is a beloved television
Oh yeah,
series.
it went on for 10 years, and I think I was paid $10,000 to do
Right.
that. And for that had to take all the accolades
Right.
that came along with it, and people saying, "I love you," and I'm going. And I actually, one of the reasons I decided to quit television and to do Crash and $1 Million Baby was because I woke up in the middle of the night. Things seem to happen in the middle of the night, having seen a vision of my tombstone. And it said, "Paul Haggis, creator of Walker, Texas Ranger."
That was a big motivating factor.
I had to do something to erase that.
Right.
So that's the only reason I wrote $1 Million Baby.